This is a More Than Just Podcast production.
Welcome to Spotcast, Season 5, Episode 2. My name is Timothy. I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kuline in Mississauga, Ontario.
Hello there, kids.
And we also have Jaime Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
Alrighty. So, as usual, we'll start with some fact check. We were talking about the Old Man TV show with Jeff Bridges that is on Disney Plus in Canada. I think I said Netflix last week, and I think you said it was on Hulu, Jaime?
I think it is an FX show, which means it comes out on Hulu. Here in the US.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. And as I've written it down here, Hulu FX's The Bear is also on Disney Plus in Canada. But it's on Hulu in the United States of America. And you guys had it like months before us, right?
I don't know about The Old Man, but The Bear, yeah, we had it for a while here. So in one of those, the internet has made distribution instantaneous and cheap. So let's play games with what premieres where in which country, as they are wont to do.
Ooh. Yeah, because I think The Bear just ended here about, maybe sometime in August, I think August, maybe September. Wasn't that long ago. And it's only 7 episodes long, so it couldn't have been that long. And it was coming out every week. But yeah, 2 good shows. Check them out on your choice of network. Anyway, and you can binge them both now, which is nice. I think that's what happened with The Bear, is I had missed The Bear, or sorry, not The Bear, The Old Man. I had missed The Old Man, and I was able to watch all the episodes at once. I mean, it was one of those ones where, that's a get yourself a bag of popcorn and binge that guy. Alrighty, so we'll move on to headlines, and Jonathan's up first, I think.
Yeah, just one bit for me this week. So this one, it's funny. It had been rumored for a long time that this might happen. So we got news this week that there's going to be a sequel to the 2005 cinematic tragedy called Constantine, which is, of course, based on the John Constantine character from DC/Vertigo Comics. The original came out 17 years ago, starring Keanu Reeves. It was one of...
Who doesn't age, he just doesn't age, right?
No, true, but it was truly one of the weirdest decisions. I remember having these discussions amongst the comic community when he was cast, when it was coming, and everyone was like, really, John Constantine? John Constantine is supposed to be, A, British, B, very lived in. He's a good-looking guy, and he's charming, but he's supposed to be very much more sort of rough around the edges, and Keanu at that point was a very clean-cut person. It's not a great movie. I don't know if either of you have seen it, but it's not good objectively. And yet they've announced that they're going to bring back the whole gang. So the screenplay is going to be written by Akiva Goldsman, who, of course, has done lots of Star Trek work. And it's going to be produced alongside a guy named J.J. Abrams. So they're clearly taking a swing. But
is Jenna Coleman going to be in it too, or not?
No, I think they're kind of keeping those. Well, yeah, the Johanna Constantine character is a different. So in the comic book version of that Sandman story, which you have seen on Netflix, that part is played by John Constantine. They have just done it differently in the television version for a couple of reasons. One, so they don't get mucked up in DC continuity, and two, because it was decisively white, cisgen, male comic book series written in the 1980s. And so they've gone through and they've added more color and people of color. They've added more women. And that was one of the circumstances I think the most sense.
Okay.
So.
And well, the other thing about Keanu Reeves that I always thought was weird, at the time he was casting Constantine, it was like right smack in the middle of the Matrix movies, right? Like it wasn't that far off.
Yeah, it was just somewhere near the end of that. Yeah, because I can't remember when those finished up. But
yeah, he was Neo at that point in everybody's mind. But I mean, maybe he was a hot property and studios just had to have the name and whatever. That may be why they cast him.
I can only assume that is what they were thinking at the time. I just don't understand. I don't know, other than the people who were involved in this, like, Abrams and him, and I don't know who's asking for this. I don't know if you guys watched much of the DC Legends of Tomorrow that had Constantine on it, John Constantine. In that version, and I'm drawing a blank on that actor's name. I don't know if either of you remember his name. I could look it up, but he's amazing. He's so good, and he's exactly what I pictured John Constantine actually being. I pictured John Constantine being a mix of like 1980s Tom Waits and Sting.
I'm just looking here now. Okay. I didn't watch that series. That was
it was great. Ryan. Matt Ryan, yeah. So Matt Ryan, it was a short-lived series, 13 episodes on TV. That series was good, but it didn't really push the envelope very hard. It was trying to be like a primetime TV show on network TV, and so it never really kind of went as far as probably a Constantine show ought to. They gave him a little bit more edge when they took him over to the CW and they revived the Matt Ryan incarnation and had him be part of the Legends of Tomorrow. He had lots of good stuff in there and was a little more sort of true to the character from the books. Although, again, the character from the books is just a really complex character, really, really shady in a lot of ways. Like I say, that's when I picture Constantine, Matt Ryan will be my go-to, for the time being, unless somebody else comes in and steals that role. He did a bang-up job of playing that part.
Cool. Well, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, like, it was interesting have you ever watched The Matrix Revolution? What's the new one called?
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that.
Resurrections.
Have you seen it, Jaime?
I did, yeah. I saw it during December of 21 because that was the final... Well, the reason I know this is because that was the final movie in the HBO Warner Brothers. We're going to show all of our first-run feature films.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you got an advanced view, yeah.
Yeah. So it was like, that entire year, just about every month they had one of their big-ticket movies, and that was the big reason to get HBO Max during 2021.
Yeah. Well, without giving away too much, he, the Neo character or the Anderson, Mr. Anderson character is, he's the senior game designer who wrote a game called The Matrix. Is how that story starts, right? So, and that made sense because then you could sort of shove Keanu Reeves into the role, and he's a little bit wrinkly, and he's been doing it for 10 years or something like that as a franchise kind of thing. So that's how they kind of explain the older guy, right? But even Carrie Ann Moss was she had a teenage kid and all that kind of stuff. So they kind of worked in their age differences between the original show and this one. To kind of explain the time lapse, right? So I don't know. Constantine's kind of a weird character, but I mean, as somebody coming to Constantine from like no background whatsoever, like all I remember from the Constantine movie was the scene with the bathtub, and he fills the bathtub and he gets into the bathtub, and it's like you leave an 8-year-old boy alone in the bathroom for 10 minutes, and the entire place is covered in water. That's what I remember from the movie. Right? So yeah, that was pretty much it.
Yeah,
I'd also throw in Tilda Swinton as the angel. I don't remember which one it was. The angel that was sort of antagonizing him.
Okay.
No, you don't remember this? Also, Satan.
As soon as you say Tilda Swinton, I was thinking of Doctor Strange, and
she's Gabriel. She's Gabriel. Yeah, again, bottom line on that story is I don't know who this is for, and I don't know why they're doing this, and I don't know who's going to see this. So best of luck to them all.
Not for you, obviously. So yeah, it's not for the 40-year-old, older 40-year-older audience. It's for the 20-somethings, right?
Which is again strange because you'd think it's our generations that would be more like, oh, Keanu. But this is just a sign. Yeah, maybe this is just a sign of the Keanu-sance that that everybody's just loved him so much since the sort of John Wick sort of revived his career and everything.
Yeah.
It's a Warner Brothers production, though, right? So that means that no matter what it does in the theaters, it plays real good on HBO Max. So it's kind of the new scheme for all of these things, right? Got to fill up that content library.
Roger Ebert added the Constantine movie to his list of most hated films of 2005. Good stuff. Good stuff. Ow.
Well, speaking of filling up the content library, so apparently the fine people at Apple TV Plus have picked up not one, but 2 seasons of the untitled Vince Gilligan project. Vince Gilligan being the creator of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and it will bring back at least the actress Rhea Seehorn, who did play Kim Wexler. It's not necessarily a Kim Wexler show, but there's no details other than that for now. But exciting for Apple TV Plus. That's a good creator to have, good actress to have starring in a show.
I want her to win an Emmy award so bad. So we didn't really talk about the Emmys last week. The Emmys obviously happened in our time last week. That show, and I admit I have not watched the last season, so please don't spoil anything for me. But I have really been a fan of that show. I just haven't made time to watch the last little bit. But she's fantastic, and that show got nominated for 46 Emmy Awards over its seasons and won 0. I just don't even know how to wrap my head around that. Like, obviously, it was up against some steep competition. There's been some great shows like Succession and Game of Thrones and all those other things that happened during this stretch. But it seems baffling considering how good, how well written, how well acted, how well everything has been about that show, that they won 0 awards is, I just can't wrap my head around that. So I'm rooting for her. I hope she does another killer show, and I hope she wins some stuff. She's great.
How did Breaking Bad do in the Emmy run during its time?
I'll double check. I know that Bryan Cranston won for Best Actor multiple times, but I don't know how it did.
I have the IMDb app right here. Pull it up real quick.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the real facts are, because I feel like it was a show that didn't win much early on, and then when it really caught everybody's passion by the second or third season, it started winning everything every year.
Yeah, because Bryan Cranston, I think, caught people's eye really early. So he won Outstanding Lead Actor 2009, 2010, and 2014, and Aaron Paul won
16
Supporting 2010, 12, and 14, and then it won
Outstanding Drama.
How many times?
Yeah, they won 16 Emmys, it says here, according to the IMDb.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it was more backloaded. Like, I knew season 5 won a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it started pretty consistently early then. Okay.
Yeah. Outstanding Writing, Outstanding Supporting Actor, Outstanding Direction. Yeah. So it definitely did get a lot more of the love. But I don't think there was maybe it's just, as you say, maybe it's just the field of competition, but it seems shocking that series didn't do better as far as getting the awards that I think it was, fairly due. I mean, that was a great show.
Well, even the guy who plays Howard Hamlin, you love to hate that guy. He's such a, it's an interesting character. Yeah. Oh. Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to the main part of the show. We're going to talk about various shows this week again, like we did last week, right? So which one do we want to dive into? Well, I guess we'll start with Lower Decks, since it's a Star Trek week.
I think that's it. Yeah.
That's the whole purpose of this show. This week was an episode, season 3, episode 5. It was called Reflections. Sort of an Alice in Wonderland, mirror, mirror on the wall kind of episode. Rutherford gets a glitch in his headgear. Tendi clears the cache on his buffer, and he uncovers a secret, an alternate identity of himself, right? And mayhem ensues, and that's sort of the A story, and I guess where the title comes from. And it's sort of he even ends up in the sort of the construct that they have from the Matrix, with the white area where the two beings are talking to each other, trying to solve the problem. And in the B plot, Beckett Mariner and Boimler get sent down to the planet to like a convention, and they're recruiting, sent down with a booth to recruit people for Star Trek, or for the Starfleet. And and of course the order from Ransom to Beckett Mariner is to not leave the booth. So she's challenged by all kinds of people, and Boimler's trying to keep her in the booth. And of course, there's lots of funny jokes, and again, we talked about the next tent over to them is an archaeologist. I forget what they call her, a space archaeologist or something like that.
They're the Independent Archaeologists Guild. Independent's important.
Yeah, independent, right? Yeah. Meanwhile, there's she's accusing her of being only interested in going and removing artifacts from the museum that's just conveniently behind the booth, right? So there's kind of an interesting thing there. So what do you guys think of the show?
I think it was pretty interesting as a both a one-off show, right? It dives into a character, but it also sets up things for the next time related to, I forget the name of the like scientist archaeologist who's kind of on the shady side, the gray area thing. And it also continues part of the character's arc, because we had seen, so I was going to ask, maybe my big question is, this episode makes it seem more strongly this was a Starfleet plot, or someone within Starfleet of some sort. But I could have sworn we saw a flash of memory from Rutherford that made it seem like it was potentially a Romulan plot. So that's one where I wonder, did I misremember that, or are they intentionally sort of ducking and weaving to try to keep us guessing? Do you all remember anything to confirm or deny my memory here?
I don't remember that it was the Romulans, but I think because they mentioned that in this episode that Rutherford's younger self, sort of pre-accident, was doing illegal racing on the edge of the neutral zone. I think that there's a very high probability that there was something else up there with the Romulans. And the Romulans actually do appear in his sort of Matrix-esque head trip when he's having a race against himself. The Romulans do show up and start shooting at them, which again is not probably coincidence.
Right.
Yeah, I had that as my big question for this episode too. Was so what happened to Rutherford? Like what's the conspiracy?
Yeah, is that sort of Section 32 thing at the end there, or some weird experimenty thing? They're trying to sort of explain the cyborg implant that he's got without explaining it.
Yeah, and again, it seems like they're headed somewhere. As Jaime said, I think it's a good tee up for maybe where we're going to go the rest of the season or in future episodes. But it's nice to have those little more than just one-offs. I mean, the B plot was hilarious, but and to be fair, you're right, Jaime. It did have a little bit of a what could come out of that, but that was a little more sort of straightforward stuff. Boimler going nuts. I definitely had that for my best pew 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 section. Was I was torn between Rutherford versus Rutherford in the space race, but Boimler going nuts and just trashing people's booths was hilarious.
I think he had the most bleeps too.
Yeah. He's like, do you think we want to protect you from all these things? No, we just went out there and study freaking quasars and just normal stuff. We got to protect you from the Borg and the Klingons and Romulans and everything. Whatever he was ranting so hard, it was hard to get an exact quote out of that.
Yeah, I grabbed a couple of them. One that made me laugh was the doctor didn't spend 7 years in the Delta Quadrant, so you could question his agency. Right. And I also really liked, I failed the Kobayashi Maru 17 times, mother effers.
Yeah, when he's going through that rant, there's that one guy that says, I think that guy's being controlled by butt bugs. Which is a nice reference to that Contagion, I think it's Contagion
Conspiracy.
Episode.
It's called Conspiracy.
Conspiracy episode. Yeah.
They also had the two characters, the one booth where you make people end up in games all the time.
Yes, yeah. There's 3 really good Easter eggs I spotted. So Conspiracy, they explicitly name that, and that's of course the final episode of the first season of TNG, is the Conspiracy episode with the butt bugs. When dying younger Rutherford is fading out, he tries to transfer his memory of what happened to the older one, and he puts his hand to his face and says, "Remember," which of course, Star Trek 2. And then, the Grand Negus' staff is what got stolen. And of course, we've seen that in countless episodes of DS9, the Grand Negus' gold-headed staff. So, some good stuff in there this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that their shuttle, they graffitied the name of the shuttle over top. I can't remember, Sequoia, I think, right? But because I think that was from the previous episode of Lower Decks.
Yeah,
but
they've had a few, because there's a few that are named after different parks or something, right? Or is it trees? I think one of them is called Big Sur or something. The other quote that I had written down for a good quote this week was at the very beginning of the episode when Tendi and Rutherford are talking, and he says, "I had a nightmare," and she says, "Oh, is it the one where you're in the new timeline with Kirk and Spock, and they have cinematic chemistry?"
Yeah. Yeah, they also had the Kirk and Spock cutout that you could go and stand behind and have your picture taken.
That was great. That made me laugh. Yeah, no, this is it was a good episode. Sort of, as you say, a little bit of just fun and silliness in the tradition of Lower Decks now, and then also, some stuff to build on. It's funny when they identified the whole, the archaeologists, and of course we've seen that play out over. TNG did that at one point. The archaeologist. That's what it seemed like that's what Jean-Luc Picard's alternate career could have been. When you see the sort of the lifestyle that the archaeologist has in this one, and you think about Mariner, you're like, yeah, that totally makes sense.
I also think one quote from Rutherford to the female security officer, Ensign, when he is, his alternate identity self. He says, "Trill, huh? Do those thoughts go all the way down?" Which is not only a great line, but what? I'm pretty sure that is a callback to Dr. Bashir talking to Dax, like really early DS9, when he was still kind of like weird creeper kind of character before they sort of settled on what his personality was going to be.
Yep. And then, of course, there is a later episode in Deep Space Nine where we see Jadzia in a bathing suit, and they do indeed seem to go all the way down.
Yep.
That must have taken a lot of time in a makeup chair.
Yes, she did. I remember her saying once in an interview it did take a long time for her to get all that stuff put on.
Yeah, I'll bet it did. At which point Michael Dorn threw a rock at her and said, "I've been doing this for 7 seasons of TNG, 4 movies, plus all these episodes of Deep Space Nine. You know nothing."
The next show we're talking about is Star Trek. Is it Star Trek Andor or just Andor?
Well, it would be Star Wars, but no, it's just called Andor.
Star Wars. Just called Andor. Okay, so yeah, it's just called Andor. And it's so interesting. Like the first thing I noticed, first question we came to this was, why are they doing 3 episodes in the first week? Like, why are they dropping all 3? And, it's really well written. It's really well, the story goes really well, but I kind of got the sense that they probably looked at the first 2 episodes and thought, there's not enough here to grab the new audience, right? Yeah. I mean, those of us who are coming to it from Star Wars are just going to be, feed me more Star Wars, right? Including the set designs and all that kind of stuff, and the technology and all that kind of stuff. But I found the first 2 episodes were not as approachable as I would have expected. I mean, they were very good, don't get me wrong, right? But it wasn't until the third one where you get the big sort of, where he meets his future, he meets his Obi-Wan, you know? And we go from there. But because every episode, they were short. I mean, they were like 35 minutes long, each one. And they just kind of, they ended at a really interesting cliffhanger-y kind of point, but I kind of wonder if people would have, if maybe they were thinking, because I was thinking this, that would I come back, if I hadn't known the backstory behind the character, or the fact that this is Star Wars, in fact, and I was a new user, would I come back next week to catch the next show, right? That was sort of my impression of the show. Other than that, I mean, Star Wars stuff, blasters, pew pew. I love the idiocy of the Empire characters. The battalion that comes down to try and find. Yeah, those uniforms were
spectacularly bad too, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, and just the sort of the I mean, this guy, for lack, I don't even know if he had a name, but let's call him Boimler for now. But because he, the guy who was told to leave it alone and just ignore it and just sweep it under the carpet kind of thing, and he wouldn't let it go. Kind of thing.
Deputy inspector. His name was Karn.
Karn, yeah, and then the sergeant at arms dude, like the heavyset Scottish guy, like he was great because he was just by the book. He was
Sergeant Linus Mosk.
Yeah, he was great. He was great, and just.
Although he was doing his best. Mike Myers doing Fat Bastard from.
He had this whole Scottish thing going for
baby.
Sure. Yeah,
he was,
and flashing back and forth between the two, the early years of Cassier Andor and where we are in the story as we pick it up. It was kind of interesting, and they used the little robot B. I can't remember what B's name was, but I didn't catch what his name was.
B2EMO.
B2 emo. But anyway, they call him B, and he's all beat up and forgetful in the time that the story's being told. But when they flash back, he's shiny and new and a little bit more together. And it was an interesting way to give us the impression that we were traveling back in time.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Well, I have this one was for our sort of more truncated format. I decided to take a run at this one, so I wrote this down. So this is my suspenseful elevator pitch for season 1, episode 1, which was 5 years before the Battle of Yavin. Cassian Andor is looking for his lost sister on an alien world when he's jumped by and has to kill 2 Imperial guards. He heads back home where he creates an alibi and sets a plan to sell his valuable MacGuffin so he can get out of Dodge. But an ambitious young deputy inspector on the first world isn't going to let him get away with the crime. So from there, we kind of have our setup, but that's really only the setup for the first 3 episodes. It's not the setup for the series, right? So even if you watch these first 3 episodes, you still wouldn't have a sense of what we expect it's going to be, which is he's going to get indoctrinated into the early rumblings of the rebellion as, the pockets start to congeal and turn into an actual movement and everything else. But it's not really mentioned at all in here. You'd have to have that knowledge coming in. You'd have to know who he becomes in order for you to care about where he's going. So it's strange. It's very strange. And again, they do a good job. Good acting, good, the sets are amazing. Like, it's a real world. It feels real. But the big picture stuff, they were almost too subtle with it around the fringes. Now, I realize it's a 12-episode season, and that the first run isn't necessarily what it's all about. It is going to stand up in the end as 24 episodes over 2 seasons. But it really does feel like almost too slow a burn as to why he matters.
Well, and this is what I was getting to. Like the third episode, the end of the third episode is kind of the parallel beginnings between when he's first, adopted and when he's first picked up and is going off to join whatever this rebellion is. In fact, it's not even given a name at that point, right? Yep. He's just going off to help this guy, fight against these oppressors that are.
He has a name in the credits, but he never mentions it in the show.
No, I mean, I don't mean. I mean that he's going to join the rebellion, right? Like, I'm doing air quotes around rebellion, right? Like, he just sort of says, "Don't you want to fight them for real?" Kind of thing,
Yep.
Rather than just skirting around the issue, let's just go kick some butt, which is kind of sort of what happens when in A New Hope, when Luke is given the lightsaber by Obi-Wan, and it's not until they see the Jawa's craft has been attacked, and made to look like it was an accident somehow. And then Luke goes and finds his parents or his adopted parents, and finds that they've been dispatched by the stormtroopers, that he now realizes, okay, this is, I've turned left, I can't go back, kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's kind of where, as the ship is flying into the sunset in the end of the first episode, he's realized, okay, this is the beginning of another change in his life. And it parallels the one that he had when he was discovered on the planet in the first place, right?
Yeah.
I agree that it was a slow burn, and I think they were going from the what's the best pew pew pew, that was actually pretty tough in at least one of the episodes. Because there isn't a lot of pew 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 for the most part, right? There's the fight in the factory and stuff, but it's really not like a gunslinger kind of show. It's really so far more about how has this guy been running away from his past, hiding out in secret. He meets Skarsgård and they get a little bit more action, but it's still largely not about running off to go do something cool. It's about getting out of a bad situation, right? Seems like he's been hustling and doing stuff. I mean, bad situations. He's looking for his sister, and he starts off the very first scene of the first episode going into a space kissing club, we'll call it, for his sister, right? They keep it as Disney as they can, but it's pretty obvious what happens there.
They do call it brothel at one point.
Yeah, they say it's like a leisure house or something. Yeah,
leisure house. Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So I enjoy it. I do come from that as a fan of Rogue One, and so I was already kind of predisposed to liking the character, liking Diego Luna. I can 100% understand that, like, yeah, I would have dropped the first 3 episodes as well, not knowing what else is coming, just because, you know, I mean, for heaven's sake, if you only had episode 2, like, the best pew 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 would technically be like the only one I remember happening, and that's the Canary girl getting shot. And that's not a great choice for rooting as a fan, right? Like, that's a thing that I think will be interesting for, you know, taking a step back for all of these Star Wars shows where, like, they're all having their own kind of flavor, which I think is a good thing. I think we'll start seeing, you know, more different stuff, and it won't necessarily be exactly like, you know, the original trilogy. People are stepping out of the boundaries a little bit, kind of like the MCU has been doing. Also, so I never look up these names properly, so I called that Karn, I put him as Kyle MacLachlan in my notes because he kind of looks like him a little bit, and I decided to call Bix's boyfriend, so Bix being the lady who's helping Cassian, you know, meet Skarsgård's character. I called him Roy because he somehow looks and sounds like Roy from the IT Crowd, and is, you know, philosophically like Roy from The Office. That was Pam's fiance, right? Like, he just causes, like, the entire problem, doesn't he, by his jealousy.
Well, first of all, that was a Scottish accent, not an Irish accent. How would you know that? Yeah, Tim with 2 M's, right? But yeah, he was an interesting character, and you know, unfortunate that, you know, he did what he did, right? Because it caused a lot of grief for everybody, right, including himself.
Yeah, well, it all worked out. You know, sometimes these things have a way of tying themselves up in a nice bow. Tim ends up, spoilers, getting a hole shot through him. So, you know, rat out Cassian, end up with the firing end of a blaster.
I was going to say, I was kind of wondering if they were going to grab her and take her with them, because she seemed to be pretty resourceful, but no, she's just left by as a tragic character, I guess. Yeah,
I mean, I think the idea is that, you know, he could always come back because she is somebody who is resourceful and might fit well with the rebellion, right?
Yeah. And I'm just trying to remember the name of the Fiona Shaw. Yeah, I kind of wonder if there's a backstory to them, or they're going to come back at some point in the future. She seems to be sort of past her better days, I guess, or best days.
Yeah, it seems like she's supposed to be sort of in her prime in the flashbacks, and perhaps less so now. But yeah, Fiona Shaw is also, I mean, she's not a nobody actor. Again, she's Harry Potter movies and all kinds of stuff. Name. Yeah, she's a well-known established actress. So yeah,
for sure. Yeah, good show.
Yeah, again, slow burn. I didn't mind it, but then I have the bigger picture and all the background filling in all of my way that I'm watching it. It's funny because Xavier sort of said, should I watch Rogue One again before I watch this? And I said, there is 100% no need to watch that, because it doesn't matter. Like, the only character that we see that's carried over from that is Cassian. And
yeah, if
you remember the most basic facts, that he's like a spy and he's, you know, a killer, that's pretty much all you need to know.
But isn't Moff, what's the name of the rebel commander that the lady character, she shows up in?
There's going to be more, for sure. But I'm saying for the first 3 episode premiere, like, no, not at all. I think you're thinking of Mon Mothma.
Mon Mothma.
Yeah, she's you know, going to be reappearing. But at this point, you could watch these first 3 episodes and just be like, oh, it's a good, you know, sci-fi adventure story about a guy who's trying to get out of Dodge after a crime gone wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the whole beginning of Rogue One. The reason why we all like Rogue One is because it's very self-contained, but it's very much in that universe, right? Like, you know, they don't have the stormtroopers all lined up in perfect unison with shiny outfits on, and it's got the rough sort of, you know, outer rim sort of feel to it, right? And it's got enough of the Star Wars technology. Like, I was actually reading, I got to go back and watch the first episode, but in the first episode, one of the computer consoles is actually a TRS-80, apparently, on the set, right? So, which kind of it ties into the fact that, like, you know, like, they're using 70s and 80s technology the our 70s and 80s technology to make it look, that far behind in terms of, to give you a sense of what the time is, This is early Star Wars as opposed to, well, it's actually, it's really early Star Wars, 5 years before A New Hope, right? So, cool. I mean, I'm enjoying it again, like Rogue One. I really enjoyed it. I mean, to be honest, I like Solo from the point of view that it was in the same sort of universe. I mean, the story and whatever, and the character, blah blah blah. But that the whole sort of the way everything fit together and the technology and the way the sets looked, it felt very very Star Wars, right?
Yeah, and it struck me right off the first shot where he's walking through the rain. And so much of what we've seen in a lot of the primary Star Wars movies, the Skywalker movies, things are a little more pristine. Even when they're filthy, they're pristine. The idea that, Cassian's like, yeah, I'm going to get wet, going to get dirty, I'm going to get bruised. It just grounds Star Wars in a way that Star Wars is often not grounded.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's got that Blade Runner 2049 feel to it, too, right?
Great comp. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. 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 I have a couple quotes that I think kind of describe the kinds of characters we have going on here. So, one is, I might need a fact check here, but I think the guards, the Kyle MacLachlan and Scottish guy, like, I don't think they're technically Empire. I think they're kind of like security guards or mall cops, because the big captain or chief or whoever it is that's can't be bothered with these other guards that got killed. He wants to go off and just like give his report, try not to have the bigwigs really even notice you. I got the impression that they were doing stuff on behalf of the Empire, jurisdiction, but weren't technically part of the Empire staff itself. And I think that's why their uniforms are a little bit off, right? Yeah. They're a little bit different. But his quote just kind of gets to where the vast majority of those folks are at. And why Kyle MacLachlan is the Boimler, as Tim put it here. This quote here, right, like in reference to those two security guards that got killed by Cassian. They died being helpful, something sad but inspiring in a mundane sort of way. Basically, like don't make them freaking heroes. Make it like, news at 11 kind of thing, and then after that they'll forget because puppies, on the next broadcast. Yeah,
but that's just what the chief inspector wants, right? He wants it swept under the carpet, but not in a detrimental way, right?
No, he doesn't want to put, like, they were in a part of they were in the Kissy Club, like you said. They weren't supposed to be there. They were on duty, right? So he wants to basically make his, he doesn't want to get grief for his reports, as it were, being in a misbehaving, right? Like, he wants to keep order and clean, and again, he doesn't want the Inspector Darth Vader to come by and, Inspector Vader, because he wouldn't have been Darth by then. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't want the grief that you would get from head office kind of thing, right?
Exactly. He doesn't do it because he's like, covering up some broader slimy crime. It's much more mundane that he's the middle manager that just wants to live his life without a whole lot of, grief.
Yeah, he's close to retirement.
Well, and he also, so he makes a point of saying, like, the one guy is one of the worst people he's ever met in his life. He's like, of course he was doing something shady. I've met that guy. He was shady. Like, he knows that it's not a big deal. He's like, yeah, of course this idiot got himself killed. He was an idiot.
Yeah, definitely. The opposite quote that I'll give comes from Skarsgård character in the factory when he's trying to recruit Cassian Andor, which is a bold move of, like, not getting shot in the face when you tell a guy, isn't that where they hung your father? It's like, wow, like, I can't believe you went there with a guy who's got a gun on you. Yeah.
I had one funny one and one just really well written one. The funny one was when Cassian's talking to his droid B2EMO, and says, "You never saw me. You don't know where I am." And he says, "That's 2 lies. I will have to go home and recharge." He's like, doesn't have enough power to keep 2 lies in his memory bank.
Yeah.
But the one that I really liked was when Cassian meets Luthen, who's that's the character name, Luthen.
Yeah, Luthen Rael.
And he says, he's talking about how he stole that MacGuffin, that part, whatever it's supposed to do. And, Luthen sort of pushes him and says, how'd you do it? And he says, they're so proud of themselves. They don't even care. They're so fat and satisfied. They can't even imagine it, that someone like me would ever get inside their house, walk their floors, spit in their food, take their gear. I thought that was, again, beautiful line read by Diego Luna, who's a great actor, but just really speaks to where we're at. That sentence really summed up where the Empire is out there on the outer stretches of the galaxy, that, they are just convinced they're the bee's knees. And there's people like Cassian who are like, no, you're really not,
That's true. Well, I mean, I hate to say it, but if you think about 9/11, for example, right? The reason why 9/11 worked was because the American, sorry, Tommy, but the American government and planes and what, they had no idea that anybody would do what they did, right? It was really an underground operation that, they kind of took advantage of all of even security in Canada, because they came in through Canada, right? Just the loose borders, the lax security and all that kind of stuff. And these guys walked in and did what they did. I mean, I hate to see that it happened in real life and real people lost their lives, but this is kind of where the people forming the rebellion are coming from. They're coming from the oppressed peoples, who are smarter than the oppressors, right?
Yeah, I think there's kind of an interesting context here for that one that actually works pretty well. I'll loop it back to Star Wars, but for that time period of the USA, usually when terrorists hijacked a plane, it's because they had some, weird political gain that they wanted to have, and they would usually fly the plane, land it somewhere, and then get their
take it to Russia and whatever.
Yeah, their gold bullion or whatever was doubloons, whatever they were looking for. So it was not unprecedented in the world, to be clear, but just unprecedented for the West. And so it kind of makes sense that the Empire right now, 5 years before the Battle of Yavin, is kind of in that sleepy, we won the war, we're just kind of keeping the administration going, which would make the Death Star and its destruction maybe kind of like the rough equivalent of how does the Empire react now? Does it crack down Empire Strikes Back era? It's not a bad analogy there.
Well, it's interesting too that they refer to these planets as mid-rim as well, right? Because wasn't Tatooine on the outer rim?
Yep.
According to Luke, so this is sort of the as you move closer to the galactic center of the galaxy. Is it Coruscant? Where's the Empire's headquarters? Yeah. Coruscant, yeah. But that's sort of like it's such a administrative place. It's not even a plant on the ground anymore, right? But yeah, and this is sort of the middle ground between that, right, sort of thing. Not quite, the polished, Empire, but not the dusty, Tatooine that Luke comes from, right? Mm-hmm. Or even Bespin or whatever.
Well, and I think the idea is that in obviously the inner rim and even in the mid rim, the Imperials have a strong presence. The further you go, the less they do, and there you get into the mobsters and all the other stuff, right?
Yeah.
Space.
Where's the book of Boba Fett and all that kind of stuff are, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, you get the elevator pitches here, John, so why don't you lead us into the next one?
Yeah, so I guess we'll jump into She-Hulk. So this is season 1, episode 6. It's called Just Jen. So
now, just before you dive in, we didn't talk about this last week, but last week, I forget what the episode. I just watched it the other day, but this one they came up instead of saying She-Hulk, attorney at law, it said Just Jen.
Yeah,
in the title, right?
They did the same thing last week. Yeah.
And the last week it was it was brought to you by Tiani or whatever, right? She-Hulk
by Titania, because She-Hulk had her brand stolen, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, that was kind of a cool touch.
Yeah, they really are taking this sort of very woke, very connected, very socially connected kind of vibe that they've gotten through this whole thing. Like it does feel very like you're in on the joke, right? So the elevator pitch for this one is Jen goes to an awful wedding where she takes the term bottle episode to the next episode by getting hammered. She meets a nice guy, beats up on one of the guests, and in the meantime, Mallory and Nikki defend a guy named Mr. Immortal against a gaggle of his exes who he left by killing himself.
Right.
So the wedding plot is basically Jen goes to a wedding. She wants to go as She-Hulk and show that she's made it. she wants to go as herself and shows she's made it, and she gets shut down at every turn. And then, of course, Titania shows up to ruin her day and picks a fight, which ends badly for Titania.
Well, I mean, and the whole sort of thing, like, she shows up as She-Hulk, and the bride shuts her down, says you can't outshine me, and and then when Titania shows up, Jen's like, she's here to make my life difficult, and they're like, it's not all about you, Jen. Like, go back, like as if the whole crowd doesn't see what we all know, and Jen sees that this is Titania's here to ruin her life, not the friend of the groom or whatever, that +1, right, kind of thing, right? Yeah. So and she like you said, she says it right in the beginning, just before the cold open. Yes, this is a boring wedding scene that's completely out of the plot line, right? Sort of thing. Like what do you call it when this is sort of is it a bottle episode? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah,
Tom?
It's a bottle episode in that it's basically all self-contained within one environment. In her case, it's all set at the wedding. It's just, in this case, it's set at the wedding.
It's not part of this. It's not really. It's part of the arc. We find out at the end, but it's supposedly not part of the whole story arc of the season, right?
Yeah, it really is. It's sort of self-contained. Although she does meet Josh, and Josh seems like a nice guy, and he might pop up again.
Yeah, possibly.
What did you think of the B plot? I mean, what did you think of Mr. Immortal?
I found that one to be an interesting take on what happens when She-Hulk, attorney at law, is not there anymore, and we have what kind of ends up being like a Birdman attorney at law kind of episode.
Yeah.
It's like this nuts, superpowered person who literally, if he dies, he resurrects. It's a little unclear on his power, like whether he is literally unkillable or dies and comes back and is not permanently dead. It doesn't really matter in the details. He has been a loving scoundrel, it seems, of like, Elizabeth Taylor style, marrying a bazillion people and just kind of like ending his life, faking his death to try to get out of things. And eventually somebody figured out, because there's like a 4chan style site that has that sort of social media, and they saw him and say, hey, that's my husband that did that. So that one was pretty fun, because it's very different from having She-Hulk around. There was no like punching option. There was no, this person is strictly tied to her or her cousin. So it was kind of a neat change of pace to see those two characters kind of lawyer it up.
Yeah, and it was I think that part of the episode actually worked really well. I mean, it good combination of actors they had in there, and the humor mixed with the action of Mr. Immortal throwing himself out the window because he doesn't want to continue a conversation, stuff like that. But yeah, no, I think that part of the episode, a B plot without that main character, when they really haven't done a huge lot of lifting to elevate her supporting characters. They've been good supporting characters, but they haven't really had a moment in the spotlight like that. And it worked. It worked.
Yeah, so that's her cousin, the other girl that's the Nikki Ramos character?
No, I meant, the Hulk.
Oh, Bruce Banner. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was in reference to She-Hulk's cousin.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was trying to yeah.
Yeah, no, it was it kind of interesting to see, sort of, except for the fight with Titania, which, was going to happen. And by the way, like, kudos to Jamila Jamil for being very not herself in this kind of role. It's like, you wouldn't necessarily, she is nothing like her character in The Good Place, right, or anything else that I've seen her in. So kudos for that, for being
equally superficial to perhaps to Hani from that. But again, the American accent, and she's a lot more sort of subdued in that way.
Yeah, playing the influencer archetype, right? So that's interesting. But the kind of more mundane slice of life stuff of like, okay, you've got an immortal guy, and let's not focus on his power so much as a major plot point. It doesn't really move plot. It just is like this is how he's committed bigamy of some sort, right? It feels like he's probably violated some law somewhere. And seeing how, our main character in Jen Walters deals with being a 30-something who doesn't necessarily have everything all together that society kind of expects of you to have, the spouse and the kids and the great job and etc. And she's, dealing with somebody who, like, it seems she knew in high school, but wasn't necessarily like the closest friends with, given how she's treated. And I thought it was kind of fun that it's got this backdrop of like, who the heck is trying to steal her blood? What are they doing? But it's like not really the main point of the episode. So well done on that. And well done on this this quote from the bride being like hammered or something when she sees Jen as She-Hulk again and hugs her and says, huge boobs. Congrats.
Boobs, yeah. Yeah. I like the bit when Titania sucker punches Jen when she's still in her human form and sort of says, of course I'm here to mess with you. And Jen is so drunk at this point in her human form that she can't even remember how to turn into She-Hulk. Like, just give me a second. Just give me a second. Yeah, again, continues to be fun. It's a fun series. I know that it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I look forward to it. It's funny, and it's a nice, different piece. And I don't know if you guys have felt it too, but it feels like the digital animation or digital graphics they're using for She-Hulk have gotten a little better. Like, I didn't find her, she wasn't on screen as much in this episode, but I didn't find her to be too, sometimes she looks a little under textured or something, but in this one she seemed like it was better.
Yeah, I don't know what the difference is, but I did notice that. I do think they're going to have to find a balance as they move forward with this character that, the Hulk looks great. And I think it's because since it's a male character, they're allowed to go very veiny and angular and textured. And they tried to keep Jen like smooth and model-like, which I don't necessarily fault them for, but I think they need to lean a little harder into, if you're not going to go bodybuilder woman, at least go fitness woman, right? Where they're toned. There are squared off angles there, right? And don't be afraid to I feel like in the early parts, they kept her a little too smooth to try to make her more feminine, and really you need to make her a little bit more powerful. Like, again, like very feminine, but powerful fitness competition ladies. We'll see what happens when I assume the suit that she refuses to wear has to be the iconic suit for She-Hulk, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That's where this goes.
Oh, yeah.
Like, no capes, all spandex kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where we'll see if they earn their money on the rendering of, like, that's where you got to show the muscle there. Right?
Absolutely. So the Easter egg for this one was the one I think we might want to get into a little bit. So we talked about, obviously, the big question is still, who is it specifically that's after Jen's blood? But the answer might be in the Easter egg. So the website that Mallory and Nikki have to get into to get the scoop on what's going on with She-Hulk. So they find out about it because there's videos on there of Mr. Immortal. Then they find out that there's this thread on there that is basically threatening She-Hulk, hating She-Hulk, all kinds of hatred and vitriol. As you said, Jaime, kind of 4chan-esque. The website's called The Intelligentsia, and The Intelligentsia is a major ear perk for comic book readers because the Intelligentsia is a group of villains from the Marvel Universe. So whether or not, it's highly unlikely that it is the actual group from the show or from the comic books, because that wouldn't make sense because of who was. Okay, so one of the key members of it in the comic books is Doctor Doom. There's 100% chance they are not going to do Doctor Doom in this. There's no world in which they're going to do Doctor Doom, have Doctor Doom debut as a bit part in a She-Hulk show. Not going to happen. But there's also a bunch of other sort of weird characters, MODOK, the leader, Egghead, Claw. There are some other, the Red Ghost. Like, there's some other characters that comic fans would know that are part of the Intelligentsia. So who they decide to make part of the Intelligentsia for the comic book version, if that is sort of the big bad that is sort of nipping at the edges of this story with the plot to try and steal Jen's blood. I don't know if it's all going to tie together, but I'll be really curious to see who we might get a debut of. We actually got the debut of the Wrecking Crew a couple episodes back. The Wrecking Crew has been a very long-standing group of thugs in the Marvel Universe, comic books wise, for 50 plus years. It'll be interesting to see how who they decide to bring in as her nemesis in this area.
That's a good find. I didn't think about that 4chan site as being tied to anything. So that is for sure the Easter egg.
Yeah. There's more there. It's just a question of what and how much and all that.
So in Rings of Power, the Great Wave was the name of the episode. I think I can do the elevator pitch. It kind of goes back to the Queen Regent has a dream where there's this big tree with white, I guess like I forgot the name of it, magnolia, I think, that has like white petals and they all start to fall, and next thing she knows is this huge giant wave comes and wipes out their entire island, I guess, right? And at which point she wakes up in a cold sweat and all that kind of stuff, and we move through the story, and there's also a B plot with Elrond and his friend the dwarf. I forget what they're doing, but the idea is that this wave is actually not just a dream; it's a premonition of what's to come, and that's sort of where it. Because I see you've got here the best pew pew is the Great Wave, and the best Easter egg is the Great Wave.
Yeah, well, it is, and it is because so the effect that they use to sort of show the destruction of the island is pretty dramatic, but the Great Wave is also an Easter egg in a few different senses. So one, the Great Wave is also the dream that Faramir has in Lord of the Rings. He also is that. But the Great Wave was also a recurring nightmare that J.R.R. Tolkien had. So he himself, literally in real life, used to have this dream over and over again, and it haunted that this great wave came and sort of subsumed the world. And so he ended up using it in his writing for the story of Faramir, but here we're seeing it obviously as you say, a premonition of the bad things to come for the people on this era of time in his world. So yeah, it's kind of a multi-layered Easter egg because it ties into Faramir and it ties into Tolkien himself. And then I thought it was a really dramatic scene where just you think you're supposed to be up on the top of this mountain, all of a sudden you see this wave just wiping the city off the map. It's pretty dramatic. In an episode that otherwise didn't really have a lot of action per se. I mean, there's a mine cave in, but we don't really see much of that. And this is a little bit more of a talky one. We get to meet Adar finally, the sort of possibly, we don't know who he is, but he looks like a dark elf. And I think the part that I came back to on this one was the big question. So this show is building us around Sauron. Where is Sauron? This is about the rise of Sauron after the death of Morgoth. So there are three candidates that they're trying to show us. Well, there's two obvious ones and one slightly less obvious one that they're trying to cast as maybe this is Sauron. One is Adar, the character, because we hear the reverence the orcs speak his name, Adar, Adar, Adar. And are we supposed to think that Adar is Sauron himself? The other is the stranger, the person who falls out of the sky. Is that meant to be Sauron, reborn or in some way? Because we don't know who that is. Is it supposed to be Dumbledore? Is it supposed to be another one of the wizards? Is it supposed to be Sauron? That one's kind of a mystery. But I've seen some stuff online and it is pretty convincing that Sauron is actually Halbrand. And Halbrand is the one who's with Galadriel on the island. Because he keeps dropping these like monster hits about, like in the one episode before, he said, no one can outmatch me as a smith. Well, we know that Sauron is a smith because he makes the rings of power. And there's also the sort of savagery with which we see him attacking and beating up on the citizenry there. And then at one point in this episode, he basically says, you need to think about, he's talking to Galadriel when they're in prison, and he sort of says, you need to think about your opponent's weaknesses, only then can you master them. And I was like, oh, we have a red flag here. Like, so I'm kind of curious, is like, you know, are they tying this all together that Galadriel is going to be responsible for bringing Sauron back to Middle Earth?
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, you know, what they, you know, if you hiding in plain sight, pretty much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of conspiracy boards out there on that stuff.
That would be an interesting one if Galadriel is the one who basically causes it, because it's kind of like a road to perdition kind of thing, road to hell. It's like I ended up, you know, causing the thing to happen that I wanted to avoid happening. So had she just gone to the West and taken her claim of, like, you know, eternal peace, then everything would have been fine. This guy wouldn't have gotten anywhere, and he would have just been, you know, impotently just wandering around Middle Earth doing nothing. So that would sort of fit into that idea so far, where this Galadriel is very more like a teenager, right? Mm-hmm. Where she's just like very, very hell bent on doing things her way, and it is a little self-destructive and not quite the regal queen that we'll see later in Lord of the Rings. And granted, it's like, you know, they're long-lived elves, so you think of like Baby Yoda, Grogu, like he's 50, but he's like clearly still like a child given the long life. So it would make sense if they went that way. I hadn't considered that, but it would be interesting.
And the other one that's kind of, you know, not to go too down the rabbit hole, but they keep showing you the map. So when we're shifting from place to place, they show you where you are on the map, which is great, and I think that's fantastic. But where they keep taking you to the Southlands, that's where Mordor is. If you've ever seen one of Tolkien's maps, like, it's plain as day. Like, where they keep going back to the Southlands, where the orcs are digging the tunnels and where all the people are trying to evacuate and all that, that's where Mordor is. So it really is like something's big is brewing there. It's bigger than just the orcs are digging some tunnels. Like, I think what we're seeing is the foundations of Mordor. So again, I'm that one was kind of obvious as a Tolkien reader, but at the same time, it was also like, oh, this is so awesome as a Tolkien reader. I want to see Mordor get built. Like, I want to see this place just turn into this horrible, you know, most evil place on earth before our eyes. I think that's I'm excited for that as a viewer of the show.
Yeah. Yeah. How many episodes is it supposed to be? This it's supposed to go for 6 years or something, I heard today, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen what the final total was. I think they said, something like 5 years and 60 episodes or something like that.
Yeah, because there's only 22 seasons planned. There's like 8 episodes this season and then 1 for next.
Well, apparently, I don't know where this came from. I heard it on another podcast this week. Apparently, Bezos basically said, like, this is my last biggest swing on Amazon getting into the TV business, and if this doesn't work, then I give up.
Really?
I mean, They spent a ton of money, and you can see it. I mean, this show, like, due respect to you know, some of the other genre TV shows that we like, you can see the money. Like, man, the spectacle of it is, we've never seen anything like it. I mean, they were spending $10 million an episode on the last season of Game of Thrones. They're spending 25 per on this show. But I mean, the details, the clothing, the caliber of acting, but all the sets, all the computer generated stuff, all of it is amazing. Like, just top notch. Like, you wouldn't be able to discern this from a Peter Jackson movie. You know, some of it, obviously, you know, they haven't had the spectacle of a Peter Jackson movie. It's not like you're going to get, you know, Battle at Helm's Deep, because that just hasn't happened yet. But it makes me excited that when they do get to that point, we might see something incredible for television.
Yeah. I think, you know, people online are trying to, because it is, you know, swords and high fantasy kind of stuff, people are trying to compare this to House of the Dragon. And I don't necessarily blame them for that. I do like both shows, but they're very different shows. So this show with Rings of Power strikes me as more biblical, to use an analogy, that it's kind of like watching a Charlton Heston film like The Ten Commandments, where it's kind of a bit of a slower burn. It's a bit more fancy hoity-toity, if you want to call it that way. It's not real dirty the same way that like House of the Dragon gets real dirty, right? And I don't think that's problematic. It's just this fits in much better with The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, which are very biblical in the way that they handle their story. So you got a great quote in here that like kudos to you, because this, other than the dwarves, isn't really that quotable, right? It's not as memeable I've seen as like House of the Dragon, but that's not a, meme quality is not a criteria for selecting our media. But I think that's kind of the big difference for me, that like I've been enjoying the show. I enjoyed this episode, but I'm kind of looking at it from a different angle than I do the week after week for House of the Dragon.
Yeah, and you're right. It is a very different type of audience too. I mean, the audience that is watching the House of the Dragon, it has to be by its nature a little bit less broad, because it's an adults only show. Like, there is sexuality and nudity and graphic violence, and it's just a different tenor to the show. So this show, yeah, there's some scarier stuff, and there's some, so there is a little bit of, scary stuff, but yeah, it's just a very different vibe to the show. It's not the same thing at all. So yeah, the nature of humanity is going to be, well, they're all carrying swords and there's dragons in both worlds, so therefore it's the same thing. Like, no, fantasy can be incredibly diverse, and we're really seeing it explored from two different angles. Not to mention the fact that, yeah, sure, there's some politics in The Lord of the Rings. We're seeing that obviously this week. We saw Galadriel trying to negotiate with the Queen and, all that kind of stuff. But it's a very different world than what we see in House of the Dragon, where, it's so much about family politics. It's about, the realm politics. It's just a different vibe entirely. Sorry, I looked it up, and it says that The Lord of the Rings has got a 5-season commitment at 8 episodes per season. So 40 episodes minimum is what they're going to do. And so that also means that we are now at the halfway point of the season. Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of the House of the Dragon, George R.R. Martin, worst wedding planner ever, to quote my friend Tammy.
Yes. Big shout out to Tammy. That was a great post.
We're never gonna have be able to have a wedding scene in any of these dragon stories, because we just know it's gonna end up horribly, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So this one, we had a couple. Well, this is the sort of the Rhaenyra gotta find her a man kind of episode. They didn't quite find her a man.
Well, they found her Laenor, who prefers men.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Anything wrong with that, but yeah, Laenor. They have a really good scene where she lays out. She's like, "I think we're a great match. I think we're gonna, do great things together. I have no desire to sleep with you. You don't have no desire to sleep with me."
No. She says, I like to eat duck while most people like to eat goose.
Yeah.
Right. And he goes, well, goose can be a little greasy. Yes, that's why I don't like it, she says.
Yeah.
So, I suggest that we just go on carrying on. We do what we have to do. We have our duty and all that kind of stuff. And I'll eat what I want, and you eat what you want.
Yeah, it was a lovely analogy.
At that point, I had no idea that. Yeah, at that point, I had no idea that he was that way. But and it was the marrying of the two Targaryen houses that was the important part for the king, anyway, right? So
keeping the line, because Valerian, Corlys Valerian is like, so they're going to keep the tradition of the father's name, and he's like, all right. Here's the thing. They will be born as Valerians, but once they ascend, they become Targaryens to keep that line going, right? So it's kind of a political shell game to keep things moving.
It is, but it ties into the larger undercurrent of this whole series, which we know from the conversations between Varys and Rhaenyra, when they're talking about the fact that he has this sort of a Song of Ice and Fire subplot of, there needs to be a Targaryen there to stop the coming of the long winter that kills all of humanity. So he's on one hand, yes, obviously it's gamesmanship and everything else, but at the same time, he's also like, there has to be a Targaryen to stop this, right? So for him, losing the Targaryen name is unacceptable, because the legacy, this vision is that there has to be a Targaryen to stop it, which is true, because in the end it is spoilers. I'm going to say a spoiler in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Jon Snow is actually Aegon Targaryen III. So I had to do the 5-second countdown because I got complaints from one of our fans about how we collectively don't give enough time.
What?
To which
You
I
gotta keep
responded,
the podcast controls very close.
To a show that's like, how many years ago did we find out about Jon Snow?
I know. Well, it's funny because at one point I was talking with our number one fan, and he was saying something about, I'm getting spoiled on this stuff, and I was like, that show ended like 12 years ago. I do not feel sorry for you. Like you have to choose things in life, and you're gonna get spoiled if you don't watch things.
So sidebar. This weekend, Avatar is coming back to the big screen.
I know. I was going to ask you about that in our after show.
Well, I mean, the Sparkcast's biggest fan has not seen that in the theater.
He's never seen it. Period.
Yeah, I mean, from the point of view of 3D effects, I mean, it's a movie. Without the 3D, it's a movie.
Yeah,
right?
But not a particularly well written one.
No, exactly. But I mean, my favorite, I kind of thought it was an interesting movie. I didn't get great seats when I saw it in the theater, but the scene where the tree is burning. Spoilers for those of you who haven't seen this. Actually, maybe
See, you just did that thing.
Well, when the snowflakes are coming down, that scene, right? Yeah. And the other scene where they're walking through the jungle and the sun's gone down, and he's trying to light a torch, and she's trying to put it out, and he's trying to light the torch, and she's trying to put it out, till finally she wins and puts it out, and then he all of a sudden realizes that all of the plants are bioluminescent. That's an amazing scene to see in 3D.
I did say when I mentioned it to him this today, I was like, hey, this is coming back. And he was like, I said, do you want to go see it? He's like, we'll see. And I said, I'll be honest, it is hands down the best use of 3D I've ever seen. That scene that you just described, Tim, was the moment where I was like, wow, this is the next level. Again, not objectively not the best script that Cameron's ever done. It was a little bit by the numbers.
Well, the computer screens are cool too. I mean, the computer screens are neat.
But his vision, his ability to conceive new and bigger and better and push the envelope is unparalleled. James Cameron is an absolute genius when it comes to that. I kind of wish that he'd work with a screenwriting partner. I hope that maybe Avatar 2, 3, 4, 5.
Maybe George Lucas. You could have asked George Lucas to help him work.
I was going to suggest George R.R. Martin because he's clearly not writing anything else.
But George Lucas is so good at dialogue.
Yeah. I hate sand.
All right. Sidebar over.
Okay, so the scene that is the best bit of action, the best pew 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 in this case, has to be when we see Princess's guard realizing he's been spurned, realizing that he's potentially exposed, realizing that he's at his most vulnerable, takes Prince Laenor's paramour boyfriend aside at the middle of the wedding feast and pummels him to a bloody pulp, literally caving his face through the back of his skull. That was spectacularly gory.
Yeah. So the question, I kind of get why he did that. Like, was he protecting the queen or was he protecting himself?
I think both. I think because Joffrey, and that was the young man's name, because Joffrey,
was he literally
Joffrey died at a wedding.
The Red Wedding?
Died at a wedding.
Okay.
Because Joffrey explicitly comes over to him and says, I figured this out. It took me like 10 seconds to figure out that you're in love with the queen because of this nasty look on your face and everything else. I think it pointed out to him that everybody's going to know. I'm I have to kill this guy because he's going to tell somebody and I'm just going to be ruined and it's all going to go south.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, after he's already confessed this to the queen and is basically, he expects to either be gelded and or killed. So I think at this point, he's just like, he figures he's got nothing to lose and he's so angry. He's angry for being spurned by the princess. He's angry at, having to confess to the queen. He's angry at this person for having figured out his feelings, and he just snaps. And in the end, he's about to commit suicide in the garden, and the queen stops him and So now the Queen potentially has an agent with some very interesting information on her side of the impending civil war that's going to break out between Rhaenyra and Alicent. That scene, by the way, and as we're going by best scenes, the scene where Alicent shows up late to the wedding feast, or the pre-wedding feast, engagement feast, in the bright green House Hightower dress, and just walks right in the middle of Viserys' speech and goes and sits down, was fantastic. And of course the one brother leans over to the other brother and sort of says, "Do you know what the green means? It means this is the color that House Hightower in Old Town lights their high tower when they're going to war." And so we know that basically Alicent has taken her father's advice from the earlier part of the episode, which is, if you do not protect your children, one day Rhaenyra will have to kill them. And so she's basically chosen, fine, if it's going to be a war, I'm going to war. And she has this outfit and basically makes a scene and embarrasses her husband. And yeah, it was just great. Really, really good acting by Emily Carey. And this is the last week. So this is the sort of turning point in this first season. So the first 5 episodes were focused around...
Wait, there's no more episodes out for a while?
No, but it is a turning point because... So Millie Alcock playing Rhaenyra and Emily Carey playing Alicent as the younger versions of themselves. So from ages, 12 to 19 or 12 to 18. That's sort of what we've been watching this first 5 episodes. There's going to be a time jump in this next episode, and there'll be 2 new actors playing those roles. And they were actually cast first, and those other actresses were cast because they looked similar to them. So from here on out, we're going to have 20s versions of Rhaenyra and Alicent played by different actors, and a time jump that's about 10 years into the future. So it's going to be a bit of a shock to the system, I think, for a lot of people who have gotten used to these familiar faces and familiar characters. All of a sudden, we're going to see some new faces, and we're definitely going to have taken a jump forward. There's going to be some new characters introduced. There's going to be some kids. And yeah, so this is sort of the last, first half of the season is over, and this is also a bit of a turning point in this too.
Oh, I see. Eve Bess is coming in as Rhaenyra Targaryen. And then what's the other one? Queen Alicent is Olivia Cook. I don't recognize her.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird switch to have that switch happen mid-season. I guess it works out timing-wise with the, where the story is going, but it is going to be an unusual one to ride out the rest of the season with different actors.
Yeah, and they should actually be more than this season with those ones carrying forward. Like, I think they were sort of intended to be the sort of stars of the show in the end, the 2 actresses you just mentioned, Tim. But I like that we got the time with them when they're younger. I like that we had the time to sort of establish where they were and how they sort of got to where they were as women, to see who they were as girls. I think that's going to mean a lot more as we start to know who they are as adults. I do think this is really interesting. And I think we're thinking about it episode to episode, but when you think about it as a totality of the season and then the series, I think it'll seem much more organic. Oh, of course, we're used to more time jumps. We're used to more characters coming and going. It'll make more sense. Cool. In this episode, we kind of skipped over the beginning of this episode, which is we finally get to meet Daemon Targaryen's wife for a few minutes, because Daemon, after being banished to the Vale.
Oh, yes, right.
Daemon was banished to the Vale in last episode because he was trying once again to seduce his niece and try and claim power. His brother, Viserys, sends him back to the Vale, where he is married to this woman, and he shows up and essentially kills her. He basically spooks her horse, knocks her off, she falls down and breaks her neck, and he realizes she's paralyzed, and he's going to walk away, basically letting her die out there in the environment. And then she makes a second joke. She makes several jokes about his impotency, which we've seen across multiple episodes, right? His inability to succeed in the completion of the sex acts.
The task, yes.
And when he starts to walk away, she says, "I knew you couldn't finish." And he goes over and picks up a very large rock, and apparently he can when he needs to. So yeah, that was an interesting twist too. So again, then he strolls into the wedding feast and basically says, "Oh no, poor woe is me. My wife is dead. I am now Lord of the Vale, and also I'm back because there's no reason for me to be there if I'm not with my beloved." who clearly he didn't even consummate his relationship with. But yeah, it basically puts Daemon right back in the mix of things at King's Landing, which is good. He's a great character. Matt Smith's a great actor, and it's so much fun to have him around, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we end with clearly it looks like, the last thing that happens is the king drops, right? So I'm pretty sure that's it, right?
I don't think so. I think he's supposed to still survive for a little bit longer. I think he'll be in this week's episode. But that was the impression I think you're supposed to be left with. Because when he drops at the end of the episode, we see Laenor and Rhaenyra get married in a very quiet little ceremony that basically says, like, let's just get this over with before everybody changes their minds.
Well, it's going to be 7 days of partying and drinking and all that kind of stuff, and then this fight breaks out, and then they decide let's just get this over with and hurry up and get this done.
Before they even mop the floors up to get Joffrey's blood up off the floor. Like, so gross.
Yeah.
But I think then we see Viserys basically at the end of the ceremony. We've seen him in declining health over the whole course of the season. We see him getting stabbed by the throne. We see him having these kinds of problems. A good leeching can fix that. And then this week we see him in pretty bad shape. Like, he's clearly struggling with his health. His arm is really messed up. He's clearly struggling. And then in the end of the episode, he basically collapses. And we see the symbolism, obviously, his crown falls off his head and rolls across the floor. But my loose, and I have not read Fire and Blood, but my loose understanding of the facts of that is that he's not quite gone yet. But I think he's on his way out the door. Because that's what kicks off the Civil War, right? The Civil War starts when he dies, because then is it Alicent's kids or is it Rhaenyra and her family?
Well, and that's sort of what you're saying about the father. Is that Hightower? The
Otto,
former Hand of the King?
Yeah, Otto Hightower.
Yeah, he points out that, that they won't accept a woman as sitting on the throne, and it'll basically lead to war, right?
Yeah.
Which is, again, another strategic reason why the two Valyrian houses get together, because they need a navy, right?
Yeah. Well, and more dragons, right? So even though Corlys is not a dragon rider, he's a trader, a shipment, a shipper.
Yeah.
His wife, Rhaenys, is a dragon rider. We see her in this episode riding her dragon. So it basically brings them back into the fold as, all the dragon riders, all the Targaryens, she is a Targaryen, are sort of back under one banner again, which is important.
Cool. All right. And I guess we'll move on to our picks, or our watch list. And let's move on to our watch list instead this time. So we'll move on to our watch list. And Jaime's up with a rather important update to FIFA 23.
That's mine. I'll try that again.
Oh, sorry. Jonathan's up with a rather important update to FIFA 23.
Yeah, I have not bought a FIFA game in a number of years. I do like a good FIFA soccer game, but I haven't kept up with them. But boy, there's a reason to get this one. So FIFA 23, they announced this week that Ted Lasso is going to be in this edition of FIFA 23, and if you want, you can play as Richmond AFC, as the Greyhounds, in the upcoming game, which is coming out on September 30th. So even if you aren't a big soccer buff, you want the opportunity to play as Jamie Tart or Danny Rojas, so Sam Obisanya, Roy Kent, you can dress your lineup and you can get out there. And of course, on the sidelines, there'll be good old mustachioed Jason Sudeikis as Ted Lasso. So yeah, this looks super fun and super funny. I like it when video games have a little fun with themselves and do stuff like this. So I think this is great. So
But isn't Roy Kent a coach now, Will?
I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be... It says in this copy, this is from an article on Entertainment Weekly, it says that the manager will be accompanied by his in-game right-hand man, Coach Beard, as well as a collection of the team's star players, including Jamie Tart, Danny Rojas, Sam Obisanya, Roy Kent, and Isaac McAdoo. So Isaac's the new captain. So I don't know if it's like a best of the Greyhounds or how they're putting it together, but if you couldn't play as Roy Kent, why would you even? He's here, right, he's there, he's everywhere. Yeah.
I wonder if they'll have like
the chance. Please.
No, the bleeps.
Yeah. But yeah, again, just fun. Again, I like it when these games kind of have some fun with themselves, and yeah, the idea of having it in there is really funny.
Mm-hmm. All right. And Jaime, what do you got for us?
Mine is Quantum Leap just started. New series this week. The premise right here, right from IMDb, is set 30 years after Dr. Sam Beckett stepped onto the Quantum Leap Accelerator and vanished. A new team follows that must restart the project, hoping to understand the mysteries behind the machine and its creator. So not a reboot, but technically a continuation. The TNG version, perhaps, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look up here where it's playing in Canada. Is it playing in Canada, Jonathan?
I have not seen anything. I was actually wondering that because I didn't even realize that it started. I knew that it was coming, but
I thought it was a woman actually.
No, the
Apple.
The lead is an
Apple TV?
Asian American, which I think is again a nice bit of change up there too, right?
Looks like Apple TV Plus here, but it says not available to watch yet. So when is it? Has it already started for you, Jaime?
It just started this week.
Oh, maybe it's on Apple. Well, it says Apple TV Plus here as part of the JustWatch.com.
We'll get it delayed. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, when I switched to Canada and on JustWatch.com, it says not available for streaming. Where is this? On NBC.
Wait a minute. It says Season 1, Episode 1, July 13th, 1985. What?
That's the title of the episode. That's when it takes place.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So right now, I'm looking it up on Apple TV, and it says it's just a buy. You can buy the first episode, or you can buy the season pass. That's what I'm seeing. Oh, hang on. It says Watch Quantum Leap 2022 on City TV.
City TV. Okay, all right.
It says right at the bottom in very small letters. So City TV in Canada. Okay. So you should be able to get that through your Rogers Ignite or Bell Vibe and any of those kind of things.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, so Raymond Lee is apparently an actor from Kevin Can F Himself. I've not seen that show, so I'll take their word for it.
He plays the love interest.
You've got Mason Alexander Park, who played Desire on The Sandman. And rounding things out of people you'll definitely recognize is Ernie Hudson, is from Ghostbusters. He was Winston Zedmore. So he's here as like the I don't know, I can't remember. He's like a military guy. He's like a military guy trying to hold it together on this crazy project that they're doing. Again, they're reviving the Quantum Leap project that from their time. So they're in 2022 and Quantum Leap happened in like 94, 95. So
cool.
It's been like 30 years since. So
and he's actually
so far set up.
Sorry, it's actually supposed to be tied into the original series, right? It's not a reboot. It's actually a revival, right?
It is, yeah. It's a continuation. Again, it's kind of like a TNG where they do mention and show like a picture of Dr. Sam Beckett, and they say, hey, this dude never came back. And it's hard to talk more without giving spoilers. The first episode kind of sets up the premise of like, this guy leaps around. You've got memory problems. In this case, he has memory problems. He literally can't remember who he is. They've got the Al type character. It turns out to be his what's it? I think it was his fiance or his love interest, right? Acts as his Al coming in from the hologram, across time. And they've got the Ziggy computer that's still active or reactivated to do stuff here. So
does it still make the funny noises?
They really don't use much of Ziggy this episode. It was more like Ziggy had been shut down. They're putting some new code and they're going to roll forward with it. There is an actress listed as the voice of Ziggy, I think. Ooh. Deborah Pratt, which is, I'm not sure how that's going to work. So we'll see. I've only seen the first episode. It's got a lot to do to not just continue where they left off for, folks like us who've seen, the show back in the 90s, 80s. But, trying to set it up for like normal people. This is a NBC Peacock streaming show. So it shows up like during whatever part of the night where other, police procedurals and medical dramas and all that lawyer dramas happen. Right. So it's got to do a little bit of groundwork. I'll give it like a couple more episodes before I truly feel like, does this warrant the mantle? Or is this one of those weirdo ones like Walker, Texas Ranger, or they've rebooted everything. MacGyver. You know what they should do? Airwolf. There you go. Thank you, execs. Redo Airwolf. We haven't seen some hot helicopter action in a long time. It's going to be picking up stuff from the 80s to redo.
Yeah,
Cool.
they really are running out of properties. It feels like it.
Well, speaking of a new property, have we talked about Kevin Can F Himself?
You've mentioned it.
I
I've not seen it.
Yeah, so it's into season 2 right now. It's pretty. It's an interesting. It's interesting because the very first time I watched first episode comes on like a sitcom, right? Whenever Eric Peterson, who plays the husband Kevin, is on the screen, it's literally the house from All in the Family. Like it's identical house. Must be a style of house in New England, New York kind of place, right? And so when Annie Murphy plays Allison in the show, when she's interacting with her husband Kevin, the lighting on the set is all bright sitcom lighting, right? The minute she separates from Kevin McRoberts, it turns sort of just regular lighting, dark, and it's more about like you're experiencing stuff from her point of view. So it flips back and forth between being a sitcom and being a drama just by who's on the screen at the time, right? Kind of thing, right? And so it's an interesting story. Like she's decided she wants to leave her husband, right? Because she's not living the life that she thinks she should be living, kind of thing, right? And so the first season she's trying to figure out how to kill him, right? And then the second season she's trying to figure out how to change her identity and move away, kind of thing, right? And one of the characters on the show that's in the sitcom half of it ends up helping her in the sort of the IRL version of the show, right? So it's very strange, kind of flipping back and forth between those kind of two paradigms for TV shows, right? And yeah, you're kind of like in her head and not in her head kind of thing. It's really kind of weird. Anyway, my picks are sort of follow-ups on the Toronto International Film Festival, TIFF as we like to call it up here. I saw Goodnight Oppie, which is the one movie that I managed to get a ticket from like weeks ago when they all went on sale. And it's about Spirit and Opportunity, which are the Mars rovers that, went up to Mars. And they went up for a 90-day mission. And the Opportunity ended up lasting almost 15 years, right? So it's kind of interesting because it's really, really well told. And Industrial Light and Magic got a hold of all of the images that the two rovers took on Mars, and they made this amazing landscape, so in big widescreen kind of format. And they had CGIs for the two robots, but just an amazing story. And it goes through like they documented a lot of the actual creation of it, and there's all the sort of, it's a lot of suspense scenes in it, and they really pull at your heartstrings in some parts, but it's all about, this team of people who built these rovers to go to Mars. Like the one main guy in it, who I've forgotten his name, but he was actually a geologist who determined that, there wasn't much more work he could do on Earth. So he, looked to the stars kind of thing and figured Mars would be the next place to go up and explore. And so he was behind the whole creation of these two robots and that kind of stuff, and rovers. And the one interesting part of the thing is like they build you up to the point where you put these things on a rocket and they take off and away they go, right? And then you're never going to see them again, kind of thing. It's like saying goodbye to your kids, kind of thing. And it's interesting because the entry into Mars, they had all this. It's all automated, right? And so there's 6 minutes where they have no idea between, when the two rockets, which launched at 6 months apart, but they arrived at Mars 2 weeks away from each other. But, as they're landing, there's all these sort of things that can go wrong. And there's, separating from the heat shield and, spitting out a parachute to stop it and slow it down. And then there's a rocket that has to fire to stop the downward momentum. And then the rover itself is hanging on a tether. They cut the tether. There's like inflatable balloons around the thing, and it bounces as it hits the planet, right? So there's like all this stuff that can go wrong. So there's 6 minutes of you have no idea what is possibly happening with these two things, and they're waiting for signals. And there's a couple of tense scenes in the sort of telling of the story kind of thing. But so it's really, really enjoyable movie from not just from like a documentary point of view, but also from the point of view of they really make you sort of live through the experience of the people who were at NASA at the time. In fact, because it lasted 15 years, there's actually a shift change in terms of the people who are, working there. Like one of the girls who became a scientist and joined the team later was a 16-year-old student intern when they landed, and then she became part of the program as an adult kind of thing, right? And there's other people that were like 8 years old when the thing landed or took off from Earth, and they can remember watching the stuff in school when they were watching broadcasts, and then showing up and working at NASA later on and having kids and all that kind of stuff. And the one consistent thing is that the lead geologist stayed on the project right from the very beginning, and it's sort of told in flashback. It's told in documentary style, but really enjoyable movie. Definitely recommend. It was amazing on the big screen, but even on a small screen, it'll be a interesting show to watch. And the other surprise was that after I finished watching that one, I knew that the TTC here was having a free screening of Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery. And I can't remember if they announced the name of the movie beforehand, but so I just walked from one theater to the other, got to the Roy Thompson Hall, which is a concert hall. It's not really a movie theater, but got there and said to the guy at the door, like, is there a lineup for this show? And he's like, no, go on in. So I just walked in and found myself a nice seat. I had to sit like 4 rows back from the front, which was not a great viewing thing, but if you've seen Knives Out, this is Glass Onion. It's a second installment of the Knives Out mystery. The one consistent character is Daniel Craig, who plays the bumbling detective, or somewhat bumbling detective. But it is. We promised not to give any spoilers out when we saw the movie, but it was hilarious. I mean, like there are some really, really funny scenes in this story. Like I don't know if you saw. Did you guys see Knives Out when it was on Netflix before? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's super funny. Like there are some, like some definite laugh out loud kind of scenes in this thing, and just I'm not going to even spoil it. Just watch it. That's all I'm going to say. It's too bad you're not going to see it on the big screen, because it did really well, in projected up on the big screen. But unfortunately, most people are going to see this on their television, right? Yeah. So, yeah. But yeah, I can't even tell you about the Glass Onion. So
no spoilers.
Yeah, definitely funny thing. Yeah, and Edward Norton plays a billionaire, and there's a whole the cast of hangers on, like the sort of how these tropes go. It's sort of the Agatha Christie style, right? Death on the Nile, Murder on the Orient Express kind of story. And there's a whole, each character has a story that they build up over time, and you kind of, and each one, it's kind of like they even make references to the game Clue, right? And the movie Clue. I think the movie Clue had 8 endings or something like that, right?
It was 4 or 5, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's and they make reference to they're using the sort of comparison between how you figure out who the murderer was in the game of Clue, and at one point there's a checklist, and everybody on the checklist gets a check next to every one of their names, and so yeah, it's a interesting story. So definitely check that out when it comes out. You will enjoy it. Yeah,
if only we didn't have to wait. If only we didn't have to wait until December. It's not coming out till the 3rd week of December. Yeah.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it's a long wait.
I gotta keep my mouth shut.
Yes,
for that
indeed.
Long. It'll be, you know what? By that time, we'll have forgotten most of the plot points. It'll be great to watch it again.
It's a wise man who knows his limitations.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. All right, well, I guess that's it for another week. So, hey, Jonathan, people want to get in touch with you. Where would they find you?
You can always get me on Instagram and Twitter as @JPKNews.
And Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you, where would they find you?
I'm on Twitter as @DevTheHair.
Well, as I say all the time, my name is Timitra, Timmitra. On the Twitter machine is where you'll find me. So until next time, we'll see you in the future. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Spotcast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spotcast website at spotcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spotcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpotcast. If you like the show, please please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spotcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spotcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
You know what else has come out this last week, which I don't know how it came out so under the radar, and I don't know where to find it because I looked, it's not playing here, is the new Fletch movie with John Hamm taking over the role of Fletch, called Confess Fletch. It must be playing in, I don't know if it's in select cities or if it's just the United States right now, because there's reviews up and it's on Rotten Tomatoes and everything else, but I looked, it's not playing in any theaters here. So I don't know what's going on with it, but I'm a huge, those Gregory McDonald original books are fantastic. I'm a big fan of those. And apparently this is quite faithful, a little more faithful to the Fletch character from the books. I'm excited to see this, but I don't know where.
Did we talk about that coming out?
I don't know if we did, because it's kind of a little outside of our area. It's a murder mystery kind of story, right?
Doesn't stop me from talking about
Well,
this.
you know. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Like, is it going to come out here later? I haven't been able to find any details this week.
It says rent on Apple TV.
Yeah.
$24.99.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to pay $25 to watch it here at home. I was hoping to see it in the theater, but...
Oh, it does say Cineplex here. Cineplex HD, so it must be coming out somewhere on the screen of largeness.
Yeah.
Who knows? No, it says rent or buy from Cineplex. So don't know if it is coming to theaters. Huh. But speaking of theaters, I did look up Cineplex. There are good seats at 9:30 on Friday at the Winston Churchill IMAX 3D. I
will consult with my people and
Avatar
and let you know. Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing it again. I don't think I've seen. I do have the 3D Blu-ray of it, and until my 3D Blu-ray TV kind of went kaput, I had watched it here, and it's decent in 3D Blu-ray at home, but it's not nearly the experience.
Yeah.
I don't think I've rewatched that movie in 7 years. Like,
I think I've seen it like 3 times, maybe, like once in the theater, and then I don't know if I sat down and watched it when it was on, but I think I did watch it. It was on a few weeks ago, actually, like a month ago or something like that. So I do remember watching it there.
Yeah, I think I've seen it 3 times. I think I watched it in the theater with you, and then
did we go together?
I think so.
Because I remember sitting at in the very edge of it and watching. Or maybe I watched it. Maybe I went back and watched it a second time with you.
But yeah, I remember watching it once in the theater, and then I watched it once 3D and once not 3D at home, just to sort of see. But yeah, I have it again. Incredibly visual, beautiful movie. Really not a great plot. Like it's just not a great movie. I know that's
the Giovanni Ribisi character.
Just there and the MacGuffins and just South Park skewered it that year with the Dances with Smurfs stuff. If you haven't seen Dances with Smurfs, please go have a look at that. You can get it on Crave. It's so unbelievably funny.
Well, the one thing that technology people like myself and Jaime will pick at this movie about is the fact that the font is papyrus.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they keep the original. Yeah.
Oh, I should take that back. I just took a quick look as I said it. I thought, oh, maybe I'm wrong. South Park is not on Crave anymore. It was on Crave before, but I think it moved over. I think now it's just Paramount Plus.
Mm-hmm. And why can't I see when I saw this? Yeah, I know I've seen Avatar more than once, but I've only ever seen it once in the 3D theater. Yeah, we should definitely make an effort to go see it.
Yeah. Well, even if the boy doesn't want to go, you and I gotta go.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Julia will come with us. Who knows?
But, yeah, she will. Why wouldn't she? I mean, we have a fourth person that can go to movies with us now.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Not bad. 4 out of 6.
She's been surprising. We've So Jaime, I don't know if we talked about this, but my one of my cousins has moved in with us. She wants to become a Canadian citizen. She was born in Germany and is up here doing her studies. So in addition to my 19-year-old and 17-year-old sons, I now have a 17-year-old ward, as it were. I am her legal guardian. So, but she's great. She's a lot of fun. She's a really smart kid. She's really great, got a great head on her shoulders. But we've been watching stuff with her. Once we sort of got over the COVID isolation and stuff that we were in, we kind of have been sort of getting a sense of, what she does and doesn't like. So we, she said she really liked romantic comedies, and we're like, okay. So we watched some of those. We showed her stuff she'd never seen before. We watched The Wedding Singer. We watched Groundhog Day, and just, some classic stuff. And she enjoyed that. And the other day she said, I feel like I'd really like to watch like an action movie. Do you know any good action movies? I said, well, I've been trying to convince Xavier to watch Batman Begins, because he's never seen any of the Nolan Batman. And so she's like, oh, that sounds great. Let's watch that. So we watched it. And afterwards, I wasn't sure if she was going to be into it or not. And afterwards, she's like, that was awesome. I was like, okay, great. You're in. So we'll see how far down the rabbit hole she's going to go with us and our crazy stuff. But yeah, she seemed to really like that. And I said, oh, if you really like that one, the second one's way better than this one. She's like, we're going to have to watch that. I was like, yeah, we are. So we'll see. We'll see if she can be into watching the Blue Cat.
Interesting to see how this goes, because, we had talked about the Dances with Wolves comparison, but if you weren't old enough to see Avatar, you weren't old enough to see Dances with Wolves, most likely. So
or the Smurfs. I
wonder how that... Yeah, or the Smurfs version. So I wonder how that colors things, like coming into it fresher and newer.
Yeah. I wonder the same thing. I don't know. Again, it is one of the highest grossing movies of all time. So clearly it must have done something right. Avatar.
Movie.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's like top 3 all time. It's up there with Endgame and Titanic. It's one of the top 3 movies of all time in gross box office. Like, it was $2 billion it made at the box office. Insane. This is worldwide. It did really well across the world.
Is it probably because of the Titanic, right?
I think so. And I think he had a lot of goodwill, but also because, yes, ostensibly the lead character is a Caucasian male, but he's also a blue cat. So I think it translates well to other cultures because it's not really centered around a bunch of Caucasian characters. I think it translates well. So I think that maybe that helped on the international front. But I'll be interested to see if, like the Disney /Fox /James Cameron world has gone really hard after more Avatar. Like there's Avatar theme park. They're making like 4 more movies. Like, they're really committed to this. Like, what if it's not good? What if it's nothing special? It's just like, I don't know. I just can't imagine. Like, I didn't come away from Avatar in the first place going like, oh my God, I can't wait to see more of this world. I was like, that was really cool.
No.
But I walked away and I didn't think about it anymore. And I'm, it's not like I went and saw it 12 times in the theater or anything like that. I don't know. Maybe there's more there than I'm not giving it credit for, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just not as excited as some or most. But to me, it's like, oh, Avatar 2 is coming out. I'm like, oh, finally? Like, it's not like, hooray, I can't wait.
It'll be weird to see what ends up happening here. So, best of luck to him. You got a whole plan for a whole legacy of this, and if it doesn't work well in that first sequel, going to be backpedaling real hard on the rest.
Yeah, well, and again, this is how James Cameron, one of the most visionary filmmakers of the last 30 years, has spent 10 years of his life working on making a pile of these movies. Again, I don't think he's going to make bad movies because that's not what James Cameron does, but it also presumes that it's going to be a hit. We've seen how badly plans like that can go. Like, I think the ultimate warning one is that, you mentioned it earlier, Tim, is the Solo Star Wars story. Lucasfilm and Disney were going to make a new Star Wars story in the theaters every year, and we're hoping it was going to make them $1 billion a year. The movie tanked, and they pulled the plug on all of it and completely changed gears to the point where, and I don't know if you guys saw anything about this, but they pulled the Rogue One movie or Rogue Squadron movie off of their release calendar. There are no Star Wars movies planned for release on any timetable from Disney anymore. That's how bad Solo changed their business model. That's how seismic it was that movie did not do well. So what happens if they spend $2 billion making 4 new Avatar movies, and the first one stinks. Asking for a friend.
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, I on one hand, it's kind of a weird one. Like when they made Denis Villeneuve's Dune that came out last year, they almost went the opposite way. They put that movie out and basically said, this is all we're doing. We do not have guaranteed plans to do a second part, which is nonsensical because the movie doesn't really end. It just kind of stops halfway through a book. And you're like, so you're not going to do a sequel? Like, was that the plan? Was if this wasn't a hit, you were just going to not do more? Because this story is incomplete. But it was a hit and people loved it and they're going to do a second one. So that's too far the other way. But the idea of planning, I mean, obviously Marvel's got huge long plans and long tails of what things they want to do. But yeah, just the idea of basically concurrently filming like multiple movies over the course of a decade and planning to release them all and getting them all going and everything else. Yeah. Like what if it's not well received? People's tastes change. The world changes. Like, what if there's another pandemic spike? Like, yeah, I don't know. It just, perhaps I've just become a pessimist in my late 40s, but I'm worried about it. That, I'm sure that there's an audience for that stuff because if there was an audience the first time, but that audience is also now like 10 years older. If it was appealing to kids, if it was appealing to, who it was appealing to, I don't know.
Alrighty, folks. We'll see you next time. So yeah, let me know about the dragon thing, or not the dragon thing.
The Avatar thing?
Flying Avatar cloud thing, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Will do.
Right.
Hi, May. Good luck to your Mariners.
Thank you.
How are the Jays and the Mariners doing?
They're both looking like very, very likely like they're going to make the playoffs and may play each other.
Let's see. So the Blue Jays are up a game and a half in the wild card of the bottom 3 folks, right? The 3 wild card folks.
Mm-hmm.
So they're up a game and a half. The Rays are up a half game, and the Mariners, who are sitting at 0 there, are 4 ahead of the Orioles. So it's looking.
So 3 will make it in?
Yeah.
If the season ended today, yes.
Okay. When does the season end?
A week from Sunday.
Okay.
So right now, ESPN does basically a statistical probability of will your team make the playoffs. The Blue Jays right now are listed at 99.9% to make the playoffs. They would have to have a pretty catastrophic last week to not.
The guys at work were talking about buying tickets, but I have no idea what.
Yeah, they go on sale on Tuesday. The playoff tickets. Yeah.
Oh, do they? Okay. Right.
I've never been to a Blue Jays playoff game.
Do they go to season ticket holders first?
I've literally never been to a Blue Jays playoff game.
Yeah. Well, I've only ever been to one Leaf playoff game. The one against the Senators.
Oh, that was a good game, though.
Yeah, that was a good game. Loud.
It was very loud.
Loud game. All right.
Okay. Talk to you next week, guys.
All right. Talk to you later.
Okay,
bye.
Ew. Gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors. It helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in one wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.